The first time I met Elijah, I was standing ankle-deep in the Atlantic, wedding dress torn at the hem, mascara bleeding down my face, clutching a bouquet like a lifeline. I just left my own wedding mid-vows in front of 200 people, including my devoutly religious parents who'd already disowned me once when I came out. Only this time I wasn't running because I was scared of who I was. I was running because I realized in that agonizing, irreversible moment that I didn't love her. Not the way I should have, not in the way that quiets the storm in your chest or makes you forget all the things that nearly broke you. I loved her because she was safe, familiar, and she knew my history. But love isn't just about shared survival, it's about feeling seen. And in that moment, I'd never felt more invisible. The crowd gasped when I dropped the mic mid-vow and walked away. I didn't run. I walked slowly, purposefully, straight through the oak double doors of St. Brigid's Cathedral like a ghost shedding her borrowed body, and somehow my legs carried me to the sea. That's where he found me, this barefoot stranger with paint on his jeans and eyes like bruised violets. He didn't ask me what I was doing, he just stood beside me in silence as if he'd been waiting for that moment his whole life. "You look like you just escaped a war," he said after a long while. I wanted to laugh, but instead I started sobbing, not out of sadness, but relief. I was finally honest with her, with myself, and apparently with a strange man who had the nerve to hand me a sketchpad in the middle of my breakdown. "Draw what you're feeling," he said, "even if it's just scribbles. Scribbles matter." Here's the twist: I couldn't draw, never could, but I took that pad from his hand like it was gospel. Maybe because for the first time in years, someone saw me not as someone's daughter, someone's wife-to-be, someone's mistake, but as someone worth stopping for. I scribbled a circle, a heart, a storm cloud, a face that looked suspiciously like his. "I'm Elijah," he finally said, smiling like he already knew all my secrets. And then he sat down beside me in the sand and pulled out his own notebook, flipping to a half-finished sketch of a woman in a torn dress standing at the edge of the ocean. I froze. That was me, exactly as I was right now, my breath hitched. "I've seen you in my dreams for the past 3 months," he whispered, not as a line, but as a confession. "I always wondered who you were." And just like that, everything I thought I knew about love, about fate, about what was real and what wasn't, cracked open like a raw nerve. I tried to shake the chill creeping down my spine, the one that made every breath feel too heavy to bear, but Elijah's presence, that strange, magnetic calm, held me in place. His eyes were softer than anyone I'd ever known, and I couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at me like that, like I wasn't broken, like I wasn't a mistake. I swallowed hard, the salty air stinging my throat as I realized I hadn't been breathing right for years. I thought I had it all figured out. Marriage. Security, a safe, predictable life where I could tuck away my secrets and pretend they didn't burn. But Elijah, he wasn't a stranger, he wasn't a coincidence. He was the embodiment of everything I'd been missing but didn't know how to name. That's the funny thing about life. It gives you what you need when you least expect it, but it's never as easy as you hope. I wanted to ask him how he could have possibly known me, how he could have been waiting for me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, my heart pounding in the quiet between us. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, Elijah spoke again, but this time his voice wasn't warm. It was dark, uncertain. "You're running, aren't you?" The question pierced through me like an arrow, and my insides froze. I wanted to tell him no, that I was fine, that I wasn't running from anything, but I couldn't lie. Not anymore, not to him, not to myself. I nodded, the tears that had been building up spilling over without warning. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing, why I was there, or why I felt so inexplicably drawn to him. Maybe it was the way he listened, without judgment. Maybe it was the way he understood. He reached over, placing his hand on mine. It was an innocent touch, but it felt like a promise. "I'm not going to tell you it's going to be okay," he said softly, "because you don't need someone to fix you. You just need someone to walk with you through the mess." I didn't expect his words to hit so deeply. I thought I was beyond fixing, beyond help. I'd been so good at surviving for so long that the idea of being truly seen terrified me. But Elijah's quiet confidence, the way he didn't try to fix me but rather offered me the space to simply be, cracked something wide open in me that I didn't even know existed. He didn't ask about my past. He didn't ask why I was running. He simply sat beside me and let me be. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I was just me. And in that moment, I couldn't deny that this strange, unexpected meeting with Elijah had unlocked a door I hadn't known was there. A door that led to something bigger than the life I'd been living. Something I didn't know how to face, but something I was ready to step into. As the waves crashed against the shore, I wondered if he was the answer to a question I hadn't even thought to ask. What if I was meant to love in a way I couldn't yet understand? What if this was the love I had been looking for all along? We spent hours by the ocean that day, Elijah sketching in his notebook, me scribbling aimlessly in mine, the fading light of dusk surrounding us like a cocoon. I never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, but for the first time it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like freedom. Each line I drew seemed to strip away another layer of the armor I'd worn for years. I felt a strange urgency in my movements, as if I was being compelled to unlock something deep within to confront the truth of who I was. Elijah's presence, silent and patient, made it easier to face things I'd been running from my entire life. But what was truly unsettling was that the more I opened up, the more the universe seemed to conspire against me. At some point, I looked over at him and there was something different in his eyes, something that made my heart stutter in my chest. "You're not just running from her, are you?" he asked, not looking up from his sketch. His voice was low, almost gentle, but there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't place. It felt like he could see the very soul of me, as if he knew all the ways I'd hidden from myself. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. How could he know that? How could he know the ache I'd been carrying for so long? My marriage wasn't just a cage, it was a shadow, a heavy thing that had followed me into every relationship, every moment of my life. I thought I could escape it by walking away from her, but the truth was I was running from me, from the lies I'd told myself, from the fear of being seen for who I really was. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. I wanted to deny it, to tell him that I was just running from a bad decision, that the wedding was a mistake, but deep down I knew that wasn't the whole truth. It wasn't just about the wedding or the ring on my finger. It was about the life I had built, the life I had convinced myself was enough. It was about the pieces of myself I'd buried so deep that I was barely even aware they existed anymore. Pieces that Elijah seemed to reach out and touch gently, like he could pull them to the surface without breaking me. And then something unexpected happened. Elijah dropped his notebook onto the sand and looked me dead in the eyes. "You're not the only one running," he said, his voice raw with an emotion I hadn't seen in him before. His eyes flickered briefly, like he was wrestling with something painful before he continued. "I've been running too, but I've been running from love, from this." He gestured between us, his hand shaking slightly. "From what this could be, what we could be." His words hit me like a wave, crashing over everything I thought I knew. A part of me wanted to pull back, to retreat into the safety of my own confusion, but something in me resisted. I wasn't the only one drowning in the weight of what we were too afraid to face. His admission cracked open a door I wasn't ready to walk through. I felt something stir deep inside me, something that scared me, something that felt like possibility, but it was terrifying. Elijah had painted my life with colors I didn't know I needed, but the brushstrokes were still too raw, too unrefined. It was easier to hold onto the safety of what I knew, even if it was suffocating. But in that moment, I also realized something crucial. I didn't want to keep running, not anymore. I wanted to stop and let myself feel, even if it hurt. Even if it meant diving into the unknown, into the very depths of everything I was terrified to face. Elijah wasn't the fix I thought I needed. He was the mirror, reflecting everything I'd been hiding from, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to look. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, each one more intense than the last. Elijah and I kept meeting by the sea, our conversations growing deeper, more confessional, as we unraveled ourselves piece by piece. I'd never known vulnerability like this, where every word felt like an offering, a raw declaration of everything I'd kept buried. We talked about our pasts, the mistakes we'd made, the love we'd never given ourselves, the things we'd hidden from the world. He showed me sketches of women, their eyes filled with longing, pain, and hope, all of them looking like me, like I had been his muse long before I even met him. His art was not just a reflection of me, it was a manifestation of everything I had been too afraid to confront. But there was still something else, a quiet intensity between us that neither of us spoke about. One night after a long evening of talking, Elijah took my hand and led me to the edge of the water. The waves crashed rhythmically against the rocks, a lullaby that was both soothing and unnervingly loud in the stillness of the night. I could feel the electric tension between us, thick and palpable, like a storm waiting to break. The moonlight reflected off his face, casting a glow on his features that made him seem almost unreal, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking, both of us caught in the gravity of the moment. And then, without warning, Elijah turned to me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "I never wanted to love you," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper above the crashing waves. "Because if I let myself love you, I'd have to admit something about myself that I'm terrified to face." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. He couldn't be serious. He couldn't have just said that. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell him that it didn't matter, that I didn't need him to love me to understand what we were building, but he raised his hand, silencing me before I could form the words. "You think this is easy for me," he continued, his voice breaking. You think I don't know what I'm doing? I've spent my life painting pictures of love I could never have, and then you showed up and you were everything I didn't know I wanted, everything I didn't think I deserved. But I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for you." His words stung like a slap in the face, and for a brief, awful moment, I thought I might sink into the sand and never come back up. How could he say that? After everything we had shared, but then the truth settled in, heavy and undeniable. Elijah wasn't afraid of loving me. He was afraid of needing me. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, and suddenly I understood. All this time, I had been running from a life that felt suffocating, trapped in a marriage that had never truly fit me, but I wasn't the only one. Elijah had spent his life painting versions of love, creating illusions of connection and intimacy, without ever allowing himself to truly experience it. We were both running from the same thing: the vulnerability of truly letting someone in, the terrifying possibility of opening ourselves up to a love that might break us, that might leave us raw and exposed. But in that moment, as the cold sea breeze swept over us, I realized something else. I didn't need him to be ready. I didn't need him to fix me. I only needed him to see me, to accept me as I was. And maybe, just maybe, we could learn to love each other, not in spite of our fears, but because of them. I took a deep breath, then gently pulled him closer, my voice trembling as I whispered, "It's okay, we don't have to be ready, we just have to be brave enough to try." It was an impossible thing, really, what we were asking of ourselves: to love someone not in spite of their flaws, but because of them. To be brave enough to expose the parts of us that had always been kept in shadow, to trust that even the rawest, most vulnerable parts could be held with tenderness. I didn't know if we could do it, if we could actually overcome the weight of our pasts, the fears that clung to us like second skin. But as Elijah's arms wrapped around me, tentative at first, then stronger, I realized that maybe the journey itself was the answer. Maybe love wasn't about perfection or timing or readiness. Maybe it was just about showing up, even when you were terrified, even when you felt unworthy, even when the world told you that you were wrong. It was about holding each other through the mess, through the storm, through the uncertainty. In the days that followed, everything shifted, not all at once, but slowly, like a shift in the tide. Elijah painted me not just the woman who had stood at the edge of the ocean, but the woman who was beginning to bloom into something more. He painted me in colors I'd never allowed myself to see before: shades of lavender and deep teal, the colors of quiet strength and open vulnerability. And as I watched him work, I began to see myself in a new light, not as a broken promise, not as a mistake, but as someone worthy of the love I had always run from. I wasn't just the woman who had fled her own wedding. I wasn't just the scared girl hiding in the shadows of her own heart. I was someone who could be loved as I was, with all my imperfections, my scars, and my past. And for the first time in my life, I realized that love was never about fixing anyone. It was about embracing the mess, the chaos, the beauty in the broken pieces. One evening, as I stood before one of Elijah's paintings, a portrait of me raw and real, standing under a stormy sky with the ocean crashing behind me, I saw it. The love I didn't know I needed. It wasn't the picture-perfect love I had imagined for so long. It wasn't neat and easy. It was messy, complicated, and terrifying, but it was real. And in that moment, I understood that what Elijah had been painting all along wasn't just my life, it was his too. He had been painting the possibility of love I'd never let myself believe in. And in doing so, he had painted my life with the very love I had spent a lifetime denying. As I stood there, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we had shared, Elijah walked up behind me and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. He didn't need to say anything. His presence was all the words I needed, because in that quiet moment I realized that love was never about finding someone to fix you. It was about finding someone who could stand with you in the mess and still see you as beautiful. And with Elijah, I knew I wasn't just seen, I was loved. In a way I never could have imagined, in a way I had always been afraid to ask for, and as we stood there together, facing the storm, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next, together.